Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca,
And I'm Landon.
and welcome to Mormonish Podcast. We have a really interesting guest on today for you. We have the wonderful Kate. How are you today, Kate?
I'm doing great.
Yep, you can kind of see from our slide. Now, if you're listening, I'll read it for you. We are going to be talking about a topic that we've actually brought up just like kind of randomly in different podcasts that we've been doing lately. And I made a couple posts about it. And this is how we connected with Kate. And people have expressed a lot of curiosity. Just as we kind of mentioned this on other podcasts, we are going to be talking about the Granite Mountain Records Vault today. And Kate has some expertise in this. So why don't you introduce yourself, Kate, and then we'll dive right in.
Yeah. I'm Kate. My experience that I will be sharing today comes from my own personal work experience at the vault, actually. Every time it would come up in conversation, people are like, that's totally a myth, right? I'm like, well, unless, all of the work I've been doing for the last few years is a lie, then no. So yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into this later in the episode, but I started working at the vault as an undergraduate in college, and then and worked there for the summers, and then went back for a 2-year contract a couple of years ago working on some digitization projects. So kind of have been in and out over the years and have seen a lot of changes and seen how the work has changed. So hopefully can offer a little insight into what goes on in the building.
Oh, we'll take anything. People really don't know about this, and also, like you said, some people think, oh, that's just a rumor or that's a myth, but it's not. It's very, very real. And yes, Mormonish listeners and viewers, we have found someone who actually worked inside. So we're really excited about this, aren't we, Landon?
We certainly are. And of course, because Kate worked there and her job was dependent on that. And that's why she's here as an avatar. She's a fox.
That's right. A stone cold fox.
Stone cold fox, as we like to say it. So,
I love it.
because, yeah, she obviously doesn't want people to know who she is. But she wanted to tell the story of what she's
Yep.
done at the vault and the work that she did there. So we're excited
Yep.
to hear about it.
We really are. And I feel like we've had a lot of avatars recently, just for various reasons. I feel like maybe you and I should just become an avatar. I would not have to comb my hair or anything
Yeah,
like that. I think it'd
that's a
be
good
really
point.
easy. So, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? It'd be
Yeah.
great. Of course, could I find an avatar that has reading glasses? I don't know if I could.
You can make one.
I could make one. You're right. That's it. It's my new project. All right. We're going to dive in first because some of you maybe have no idea what we're talking about. Especially, I know that we do have some never mo's, as we call them, people who have never been Mormons. And this is something really different that the Mormon church has had in place for decades that a lot of people don't know about. So we're going to start out kind of by reading through an article, kind of talking back and forth, and then we'll get into some juicy details about the real story. So this is called the Granite Mountain Records Vault. Let's go to the next slide and we can start reading this article. We can just take turns reading. So this is from a Brigham Young University publication written by Ryan Hallstrom. And it says, earning a place on several lists of the most secure locations in the world, the Granite Mountain Records Vault, owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, houses millions of genealogical records and historical documents. Yeah, of course that's what they're going to house there, right? Of course that's what's in a secure vault.
What else do you need the most secure location, one of the most secure locations in the world? What else would you need it for than to store genealogical information?
That's right. But we're going to find out from Kate if there's more to it, right, Kate?
Yes, of course.
Of course. All right, let's go to our next slide. Like I said, we'll just kind of work through this background, a couple slides, and then we'll get into it. Landon, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, the Granite Mountains Records Vault has been aptly called the Mormon version of the pyramids. While the Egyptian pyramids were built to house the remains of a few rulers, the Granite Mountain Vault was constructed in the 1960s to store the world's largest collection of records of the dead. For many deceased persons, the genealogical information stored in the vault is the only evidence that they ever lived. This near impregnable facility is situated underneath as much as 700 feet of stone. It has an internal water reservoir and doors strong enough to withstand a nuclear blast. There are 6 separate vault chambers that are accessible by one main and 2 smaller entrances.
So did you ever feel claustrophobic, Kate, knowing that you're under right there 700 feet of stone? I mean, when you walk through the door in the morning to work, were you like, or was it just Just par for the course.
I didn't think about it that much, and maybe that was good for my anxiety. On the inside, it doesn't look like a vault. The exception is the reservoir room, which we can talk about. But the walls are actually corrugated steel, so like you can't see the rock at all when you're on the inside. So I didn't really think about it. But every now and then when I was in the back, I'd be like, oh, I really hope nothing goes wrong. Because like when the power goes out, right, it's pitch black.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. No, tell us about the reservoir room since we just mentioned it here in the article. What is that?
Yeah. So initially when they were constructing the vault, they had planned to go back deeper into the rock. At least this is the story that I've been told. I should add that. So they had intended to go back farther into the rock. However, the area that the vault is in is actually where Little Cottonwood Canyon and Big Cottonwood Canyon kind of converge. And both of those canyons were, they're different geological configurations. So if I remember correctly, Little Cottonwood Canyon is a glacier canyon and Big Cottonwood Canyon is a stream canyon. So that's kind of changed the rock formation in both of the canyons. And yeah, the area where the canyons kind of meet is the back of the vault. And so the rock structure actually changes in the vault. And so when they were blasting, they discovered that the rock that far back wasn't as stable as the granite at the front of the vault. But what was convenient was that there was like natural water trickling through the rock. And they had been trying to figure out how they were going to supply water to the vault. And so they say that it was an answer to a prayer. Otherwise, they were going to have an extensive pipe system from the mouth of the canyon, which was expensive, or they were going to have to like truck the water up regularly, which is not efficient. And so, yeah, when they realized that the rock structure changed and that there was natural water collection back there, they built a reservoir to contain it. And that is the water system for the vault. And I will say that when I worked there, they had like water tanks, like water jugs for us to drink from. And we can technically drink from that water. It is naturally filtered through the rock. But at least at the time the first time I started working there, they were still doing film development and stuff, which required a lot of water. So the reservoir is what supplied water for sinks and bathrooms and for all of the film development and things like that.
That's so interesting. And so literally they smote the rock and water came out. It's biblical, isn't it? I mean, it's like a miracle.
I mean, that's kind of, yeah, the story they tell. But I mean, you really can physically see the rock change. And the rock that's at the back of the vault is different than the rock that's at the front. So, I mean, you can actually see that. It's really cool.
That is really cool.
So did you work in the vault itself? Was that where your office would be, or did you only go into the vault when you needed things and your office was in what looks like this structure out front here?
Correct. The second one. So I was only in the back when we were getting film. And I mean, even as the storage areas behind the vault door are still that same like corrugated steel, you can't see the rock. But yeah, I was only ever behind the vault door when I was actively working in the back. Otherwise, I was kind of up near the front of the facility where these arches are that you can, I'm pointing to the screen like you can see me pointing. But those arches in the rock are actually like where the front of each of the front tunnels in the building are located. So there's like office space in those front rooms up there.
Okay, that makes sense. And it says here in this part of the article, and this is something brand new that I had learned just about a month ago, it's separated into 6 vault chambers. And as I understand it, they're labeled A, B, C, D, E, F. So 6 separate kind of compartments.
That is correct. Yes.
Now, I only see 3 in this picture. Where would the other ones be? Are they all in that same area or?
So those 6 vaults are the vaults that are like behind the vault door. And then they call them portals. There's 4 portals. The 4th one is actually kind of behind that wall that's sticking out in the constructed building.
Right here.
That constructed building, yeah, is actually fairly new. The last time I went back to the vault was 2017. And that front building was only a couple of years old. So they have actually remodeled the entrance, and that's what you can see here. But that 4th portal is tucked away to the right behind that building.
Okay.
So in front of the vault door, there's those 4 portals where all of the office space is. And then there are the 6 storage vaults behind the vault door.
Behind it. And those cars in the parking lot, no one can go in there unless they're working there, right? Like you can't just drive up and go, oh, I think I'll go take my kids through a tour of the vault. Like you can't do that.
Right. So all of those cars there would be employee parking.
Okay. That makes sense. Wow. I've already learned so much. We're only on the second slide. Go to the next one, Landon. All right. Kate, do you feel like reading this one?
Sure. The Church of Jesus Christ began storing records on microfilm in 1938. As the microfilm collection began to outgrow the Genealogical Society of Utah building, church officials started searching for a secure location where the archive could be protected and have room to expand. Sites in downtown Salt Lake City, City Creek Canyon, and Red Butte Canyon were considered. Eventually, it was decided to build the storage facility deep in a mountain in Little Cottonwood Canyon near Salt Lake City. Blasted 600 feet into the side of a mountain, the vault stores a vast collection of microfilm. Approximately 2.4 million rolls have been amassed so far, about 35 billion images in total. In 2004, these images began being converted to digital files. The images are of such documents as land grants, deeds, probate records, marriage records, cemetery records, parish registers, and other records known to be of genealogical value. The church has since pledged to digitize all of the genealogical records in the vault and make them available free of charge on FamilySearch.org.
Wow. So was that part of what you were doing? Were you working to digital, or maybe you can't say exactly what you were doing, but I'm guessing you might have worked with some of the records or.
Yeah. So when I first started the summers in college, they were still making copies of microfilm and sending them out to other genealogical centers. So like, your stake center might have a family history center with copies of microfilm in it. And those copies all came from, they'd say Family Search, but really all of the masters were kept up at the vault. And the digitization was just a small aspect of what they were doing when I first started. Because if they said it started in 2004. So yeah, that is about, I started a couple of years after that. So yeah, they had been digitizing. And then there was a team that continued to copy masters that were at risk. So like things that were on acetate film, which is really brittle, types of film that are prone to spontaneous combustion, which is not great from an archival perspective. And so things like that. So there was a team that made new masters on polyester film for greater longevity. And then there was a team that made copies of microfilm ordered by genealogical centers, mostly around the country, but occasionally around the world. Actually, I was working there when the Kyiv, Ukraine temple was dedicated. And we had this huge project that overtook like everything else that we were doing. And we couldn't figure out why we were making all of these copies of microfilm. And like everything had a barcode on it so that we, as kind of like a library call number system. And so we were putting all these labels on and we couldn't figure out what all of the abbreviations stood for. And actually, fun fact about me, is I was a folk dancer when I was at BYU. And so I was the one that figured out what we were doing because of that education. Because
like you recognize Ukraine.
Well, yeah, one of the stickers said UKRZAP. And I was like, you mean like the Zaporizhian region of Ukraine? And then I was like, oh, wait, actually, that's exactly what this is.
Wow. So you were copying records in preparation because once they opened that temple, they knew that people would be really interested in that genealogy, or is that kind of?
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
Wow. Well, when I think about my childhood, my parents ran a genealogical library for 30 years. And prior to that, that's all they did is teach classes there. They both retired to do that. But my whole childhood, they each had a microfiche reader in our basement in their studies. So that were of this, and so now I think about it, we were constantly having packages delivered of microfilm for the library or for my parents' personal use. And now I'm thinking it all came from here. That's amazing. I did not know that.
Yeah. So when they say that Family Search has, I think they're actually up to 2.7 million rolls now. When they say that Family Search has 2.7 rolls of microfilm, most of that is actually in the vault. It is not down in Salt Lake. Everything in Salt Lake is either a copy, or if it is a master, the only reason it's downtown is because of copyright restrictions, where we might only be allowed to have one copy. Otherwise, everything is kept up at the vault.
So with digitization, you would think that all of these would pretty much fit on, a couple CDs at this point. Have they all been converted? And what do you do with all that space once you've converted them and digitized them?
That's a really great question. And that's actually one of the changes that I had seen in my time in college versus the time I went back a couple of years ago. And so one of the vault storage spaces has now been converted to space for servers, because they are still receiving new images. So if you know anybody who has served a family history mission and like gone out and photographed documents as part of their mission, typically tends to be senior missionaries. It used to be that those senior missionaries, the images that they took, they would make a microfilm master and put that in the vault. Now, all of those images are going straight to digital and being put on Family Search, but then also backed up on a server. So they have kept all of the microfilm masters that they currently have, but they are not making new ones. And they have converted some of the storage space in the vault into server space.
This is so fascinating. Let's go to our next slide as we work our way through here and keep talking. All right, I'll read this one. Apart from genealogical records, the vault stores church records and artifacts. I think that's what we're most interested in, including handwritten temple ordinance books, Latter-day Saint scriptures in every language in which they have been published, financial records, and minutes from the meetings of general authorities of the church. That is fascinating. Since there are no longer any public tours at the facility, rumors about what else might be stored in this super secure vault. Some people have even half-jokingly suggested that the vault contains Book of Mormon artifacts such as the Sword of Laban, or maybe even the famous gold plates. And we've all heard those rumors, of course.
Well, the way I remember it was the Book of Mormon, or the gold plates, when they returned them, they opened up into a hole in a hill that was the Hill Cumorah, and there were tons of records in there.
Yes.
So that pretty much describes this place, but it's about 2,000 miles in the wrong direction for where that should happen.
Now that is and you're right, because it's Brigham Young, right? Who said that the plates were taken back to the hill. Was it Brigham Young?
I think it was Brigham Young.
Yeah, I think it was. And that the Hill Cumorah opened
cave
up
in the hill.
A giant cave, right? And the plates were put in and then kind of swallowed up, right?
And that there was the whole cave was filled with records and plates. So maybe I know they've searched the Hill Cumorah and found that is not the case. There is no caves or anything. But maybe they removed them all and brought them here to Salt Lake and put them in this mountain. And that's where they reside now.
Yeah, it's possible. That's fascinating, though, that list of things that are there. So did you work with any of things that would be considered artifacts or any of the handwritten manuscripts or anything like that? Or were those very, very off limits?
Those are and we'll talk about this, but out of the 6 storage spaces, there is one that's like the high secure vault, and that's where all of the artifacts are kept. Okay. And getting in requires badge access. I think it now also requires a fingerprint. It requires a phone call to security at the front of the building to inform them that you are entering that room, because it sets off an internal alarm. Like, yeah, nobody's getting into that room, even if you work at the vault.
Wow. And you mentioned to us when we were talking before, like you said, the security is tight, it's there. But did I hear you right to say that somebody like Mark Hoffman had unlimited access? Did you say that?
No, I didn't, but I did talk about objects that are in the high
objects
that I suspect might be Mark Hoffman for sure.
Yeah, I thought I read something about him having access to that. That would be really fascinating if that were true, but please don't quote me, because I think I either read it or, who knows? I can't attribute it, so don't.
I did recently learn, and this might be where this is coming from, and I didn't share this with you, but I did learn that a lot of special collections items at the University of Utah used to be kept in open stacks. And that is how he got his hands on a few items. Because they don't talk about this in the documentary on Netflix, but actually the reason that his forgeries, the paper, passed the tests when they did finally test his forgeries is because he cut them out of rare books from the time period so that the paper matched.
So the paper was of the era, and then he just wrote on it. And did you then say just a second ago that there are things in the vault that might possibly be forgeries from Mark Hoffman?
I personally suspect so.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Wow. See, it's a rabbit hole, right? A literal rabbit hole. So let's go to our next slide. Okay, go ahead, Landon. I love this.
The public's fascination with the facility was evidenced in fall 2019 when over 1,000 people showed interest in a hoax event, Storm the Church Vault. They can't stop all of us.
So were you there for that, Kate? Or did you know anything about that?
I was really curious to see if anybody had gone, because the event said that they were going to meet at the trailhead for the Temple Quarry trailhead, which is across the street at the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon. And it's actually, side note, it's really cool. If you ever go through there, it's where they quarried stone for the Salt Lake Temple. And there's a historic marker. There's a really nice paved trail. I think it's managed by the National Forest Service, I think. But anyway, it's across the street from the park and ride for the ski resorts at the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon. So there was a joke that everybody was going to meet there, and I wanted to go just to see if anybody showed up, and I can't remember why I didn't. But yeah, but I laughed when I saw this event, because I was like, actually, they can stop you all. And if anybody really wants to know, I can tell you why. But you'll be lucky to make it to the parking lot.
Right. I'm sure that's true. And I think, and you had reminded us in our phone call that it was because there was that Storm Area 51 thing going on. And then people in Utah are like, well, what can we storm? Oh yeah, the Granite Vault.
Yeah. And so they had said they were going to do it like the Saturday session of April conference, because everybody was going to be distracted. Security would all be downtown, which mostly true. There is actually 24/7 security at the vault.
Wow. Is it armed security?
So, and we talked about this on our phone call. The only people who are allowed to carry on church property are church security.
Okay.
They don't have to, but they are allowed to. And as most of church security are either retired police or retired military, I think a lot of them do feel pretty comfortable carrying. Yeah. And there were a couple of security guards at the vault who I did see carry.
Well, there's got to be something in there, I think, more than records. That's how I feel if they're going to do that. So do you remember, Landon, how we were at the 24th of July parade over the summer, and we saw the church security flanking the car with, I can't remember which apostle. And then we were digging a little bit into church security, and we found out, I don't know if all of you know this, but they have a badge. It actually looks like an official police badge. It's very nice and gold, but instead of like a shield or whatever's on an actual police badge, it has an angel Moroni on it. So, I don't know. Did you ever notice that in the security there? Maybe that's a newer addition, but I thought that was kind of cute, actually.
So the guards at the vault don't have to wear suits like the security guards do in Salt Lake. So they were much more obviously security, because they were in like khakis and polo shirts. But yes, I have seen it's like a little lapel pin that has an angel Moroni on it. Yes. And that is how you can identify which guys in suits happen to be church security.
That's right. This is not a trumpet, right? This is something else. So, oh my goodness, so funny. Okay, let's see if we're almost finished with the article on the vault. We're actually going to be discussing 3 different vaults kind of having to do with this today. This is only the first one. So, okay, do you want to read this next one, Kate?
Yeah. Church officials clarify that the site is not secure, but secure. Visitors are not permitted, helping to protect the records from tampering, foreign materials such as dirt and dust, and unwanted changes to temperature or humidity. Nested in Little Cottonwood Canyon, the Granite Mountain Records Vault is equipped to store records and artifacts indefinitely.
Indefinitely. And I know I love that. I had that highlighted on another version of this, but it says it's not secret, right? They always go, it's not secret, but sacred. In this case, they say it's not secret, but secure. And is this a pretty accurate little drawing? I just kind of found this for our listeners. It kind of shows how it goes, from above ground in the parking lot to deep into the mountain. Is this pretty accurate? In a simplistic way, of course.
Yeah, I think this particular image specifically comes from Perpetual Storage just up the road from the vault.
Oh, okay. This is not even the right one.
but it is fairly accurate as far as like what
Right.
how far under the ground it starts
Okay.
going once you dig back there.
Okay. So you'd go through offices, security, loading from the outside in, and then you get into the more secure part of it. Okay. That makes sense. All right. Let's go to our next slide. Okay. All right. So actually, let's go back one then, because we're not ready to talk about the second vault since we're still going to talk about the first one. So,
And actually,
okay.
I do want to say really fast, this might have been accurate before the remodel, because I know I mentioned that the constructed building at the front of the parking lot is fairly new. This loading dock was there in the old system, but they have since remodeled it a little bit.
Okay.
This is interesting because the offices in this one are actually located under the granite and behind the mountain, whereas we saw that picture of the other offices, they were actually exposed. Whereas the other offices would not take a nuclear strike, these ones might.
Yeah. It seems like they're preparing for the apocalypse. Do you think that?
Well, I mean, if you think about when the vault was built, it was kind of the hot height of the Cold War.
You're
so
right.
it was that concern at large in the nation. So I will give them that.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. So tell us, if you're at a party and you tell somebody where you work and they say, tell me everything, what would you say? I mean, things that we would never even think to ask. It's just so fascinating.
Oh, that's a really good question. I usually start with the really nobody's getting in and here's why. And it starts with just even getting into the parking lot. So there are 2 security gates. One of them is a regular security gate that, you'd see at like any parking lot in Salt Lake, just, plastic, not very sturdy,
Right.
but there is one slightly farther up the access road that is capable of totaling a moving vehicle.
Oh.
I was actually working there when they installed that one, and they highlighted very, very clearly. And we weren't supposed to be tailgating behind anybody anyway. But that one in particular, they were like, do not tailgate. It will ruin your car. And we
Oh my gosh. So it literally swing shut on you and total your car because it's like that. Oh my gosh. So it was hazardous even trying to get to work.
Yeah. And let me tell you, trying to get going on that access road when it was snowing, when you had to stop and badge in, was a pain in the behind. Because it is pretty steep too. And yeah, so winter weather can be an issue getting up there. And then you have to badge like 6 or 7 times just to get to your desk. And that's like normal. If you come in slightly early or you stay a little bit late, you have to badge a few extra times because doors that are open during like operating hours are closed. So it's, nobody's getting in there.
Wow. That is absolutely fascinating. Look at that. What questions do you have, Landon? Just the whole concept, the idea that a church, a religion has something like this, that's the most secure, one of 10 most secure places in the entire world. It just kind of makes you go, doesn't it?
And
yeah, I actually work in these type of facilities, and true. I don't see things this secure for things relating to national security. And so to be guarding genealogical records to this degree just seems absurd. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why they have this level of security for genealogical records. I mean, I just don't see Tom Cruise parachuting in and trying to break into the vault to find out when his grandpa was born,
Never know.
Well, so there's a story, and I don't know how much of it is myth, but there's a story that at one point there were some like teenagers that were hiking in the mountains around the vault, because all of the area around the vault is public land. And so there was somebody that like some teenage boys that were hiking, and they found this vent, and they were like, hey, let's see where this goes, and ended up inside the vault. And I've had people that are like, oh yeah, that was like so and so's, my uncle's brother's friend or something like that.
It's always someone's cousin, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds slightly plausible that maybe it was true, but I don't know. Obviously, if it ever was true, they have since changed that. But I mean, I do know that one time for search and rescue, they needed to land a helicopter in the vault's parking lot because it was the closest flat space to the search and rescue.
Wow, it's never ending excitement at the vault, I can tell. So, what kinds of people would come in? Researchers, scholars? I mean, was it all academic, or what kind of people would want access? Church leaders? What kinds of people did you see that were trying to come in?
The only people I ever saw were other church employees.
Okay.
It was not uncommon for people from Family Search to regularly come up and see what was going on. Most of the time we would end up like sending records down to Salt Lake if anybody requested them. And that did happen a couple of times, where we would pack stuff up. And I think that's part of why people from Family Search were up there. They were coming and picking up records and transporting them personally back down to Salt Lake to make sure that nothing happened between the vault and Salt Lake. But I believe I've been told, and I don't know how true this is, but I've been told that most of the artifacts, the stuff that's not microfilm that's up at the vault, is either super, like, it's redundant, it's either been digitized in some capacity and accessible elsewhere, or it's so rare that nobody is really allowed to have access to it. And I didn't mention this in my introduction, but I actually have a master's degree in archives, and that's kind of the field that I'm in. And so there's a lot of best practices as far as handling materials that, like, yes, that is the reason the church is not letting out of the vault, and that's legitimate. There are very big libraries in DC that operate under the same principle.
Right.
So it's funny, Landon, that you talk about government spaces not being this secure. And I did actually work at the Library of Congress last summer, and I laughed every time I went through security because I was like, this is nothing.
You don't know what I have to do. I have a gate that's going to crush my car. I have to hurdle over it, this and that. So what I would love to see, what I wish was in there, and I know you said there's a replica. I would love to see Joseph Smith's hat if they actually have it. And you said maybe there was a replica that they use.
Yeah, and the replica, I think, is actually in Salt Lake because they pull it out for like youth activities and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So you did have a slide that talked a little bit about some of the artifacts that are up there.
Right.
So I'll talk about that a little bit. There was the one about scriptures in every language. That is true. Every time they translate the Book of Mormon into a new language, they put a blue book copy in an archival box and send it up to the vault.
Oh.
Which is kind of cool. So if anything ever happens to the databases, they still have a copy. On the other hand, the blue book copy is not an expensive copy. I don't know if it's acid-free paper or anything like that. But the point is that it's still in an ideal storage space. And I'll speak to that a little bit too, but we'll come back to that. There was something about records from early temple work that is also true. They have massive ledgers recording temple work from the first 12 temples, up until they started keeping things in other
digital form,
like some kind of
keeping it. Yeah.
Are the temple records, and these are records of ordinances, would they be available somewhere else, or are these like, wow, these are one of a kind and these are in here?
Those are one of those that I'm sure that they have digitized or recorded them in some other capacity so that you can view them elsewhere. So there's no need to pull the ledgers out, but like they're huge. Like they're the kinds of ledgers. I don't know if you've ever spent any time in an archive, but there's a lot of business ledgers that get so they're like, the size of a placemat.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they're so thick that the spines start like collapsing on themselves. Yeah. The ones that are kept up at the vault are not in that condition, but like those are the types of ledgers that I'm talking about. Like they are huge. So that information has been re-recorded in other places so that it's viewable, so that nobody needs to look at the ledger itself. But they do have those up there. They have glass records of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Apparently before vinyl, glass was a method of creating records, and so they've got some of those. I always thought that was kind of cool. There are meeting minutes from various meetings. The few times I've gotten to take a tour through that space, we could kind of, with some guidance from the person giving the tour, pull some items off the shelf and look. And one day we found one that was a priesthood meeting somewhere in the Salt Lake Valley. So it was not like top church leaders. It was just a regular everyday Sunday priesthood meeting where they spent the entire meeting talking about whether or not it was okay to discuss the subject they wanted to discuss. Like, for example, they wanted to talk about farming. And so they spent more time talking about whether or not it was appropriate to use priesthood to talk about farming than actually talking about the issues of farming.
So in other words, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
I understand. And this is why we say things. So this is, no, but these kinds of records are just invaluable, just the everyday kinds of records. I would love to see some of those ordinance records. I mean, I wonder if they have the one where it listed Joseph Smith being sealed to all those 22 people before finally Emma, or you know what I mean? Those kinds of things would be really interesting to get your.
Oh, those would be really interesting. And if they have those are definitely one of those items that they are not ever letting leave the vault.
No. That would be, no. Can you imagine seeing like his signature and bride, and then, oh, here's Emma. I mean, just seeing it like that would be very telling.
So are researchers allowed to access the vault in these records? You say they won't leave the vault. So how would you ever be able to study anything and learn from it? And who's up there looking through these records and finding things that we may have that nobody really knew we had?
Yeah, so there's a system in the reading room at the Church History Library for requesting records. And I know that if you are doing research that involves more secure records, that there's an approval process that can go as high up as the First Presidency to vet your credentials as an academic, to kind of vet your purpose and reasoning for this type of research. And then if approval from church leadership says it's okay, one of the regular employees will then retrieve the materials for you. And the whole retrieving materials for you is actually fairly standard in a lot of academic spaces. The issue I have is the First Presidency having final say about which academics can access some of these records.
So in other words, they're not vetting if you're an academic, they're vetting if you're a faithful academic.
Yes.
Interesting. So you do have to have First Presidency approval to go in here and look through things.
You don't even get to go through there and look through things. If there is
have it given to you, yeah.
And the system says it's in the vault and you are given approval, then yes, somebody else will retrieve it for you.
Okay.
Were you aware of things that were in the vault that were not on a list that people could know what was in there?
I was never high up enough to know that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Or if there is a record, the record is only accessible to certain people.
Again, not much has changed, right? The Scotch tape.
Who's in charge of the vault? Who does it fall under?
Question.
So there's a vault director that is, I don't remember if they're assigned or if they apply, but the vault director is, it all falls under church history, so it's managed by the church history department. And then the vault director is some middle manager, really, within the church history department.
Does he get the title Lord Baltimore?
Oh, Landon, you can't let an episode go by without making a dad joke, right? It's okay. It's your trademark. We all
that's right.
Appreciate you for that. So, well, I was going to say that about, probably 5 years ago, I actually had the chance. I was invited to go to the vault, and I did not end up going because I had to work, but I had a friend who was a security kind of a person there. It was going to be during the day. My friend's like, oh my gosh, she's going to let me in, come along. And I kicked myself for that. I should have just called in sick. I mean, it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity, but apparently he went into some parts of it. And he came back telling me, yeah, there's not only microfilm and microfusion records, but he said there are seeds, like a seed, like a Noah's Ark kind of a thing. But I had never heard anything like that. And I don't know if he got that wrong or right, or if he was just teasing me. But that's what he said. Have you ever seen any seeds, like a Noah's Ark kind of?
I have not. That doesn't mean it's not there.
Right.
There is also some storage space at the vault that is being utilized by BYU that the church employees really don't manage. So there's a good chance that maybe that could be there. But I mean, I will say from an archival perspective, like the environment at the vault is pretty ideal, and that was also part of why it was built. And I can see the wisdom in that. So it would be the kind of space where, yeah, you could safely store that kind of thing. And there are spaces in the world that do have those types of collections.
Right.
I just never personally saw that at the vault.
It's just amazing. You know what, Landon? We need to go over there. I know we can't get close, but we need to like go as close as we can. It's just so fascinating that it's even there. Maybe we can find a vent
from the Canyon Road, actually.
Oh,
I don't have an issue because I know that when you're trying to preserve, records and different things that, that low humidity, there's certain conditions, certain temperatures that you want to keep them at. I just, again, I don't understand the security level that they're going to. I can understand protecting the documents from the environment, but to have this level of security, just there's something there more than just records that they don't want you to see.
Yep, that there has to be. Wow.
And when I was working there, we were told that the reason that there was that much security was because there were groups that pride themselves on breaking into high secure areas who have publicly stated that they would like to break into the vault. But again, why would that be a concern unless you're really thinking about the issue of like crowd control or employee safety from like that aspect? Sure, but also, why do they need a gate that's going to stop a moving vehicle if there's nothing secret there?
Exactly, and yeah, that doesn't make any sense. If you don't make it look like a high security area, then people aren't going to try to break into a high security area. It's going to be just like a library collection, where you've got limited public access to it.
Yeah. Well, I have. Go ahead, Kate.
That's how the Library of Congress is. They don't have open stacks.
Yeah, you have to request, and then it's sent back, and then you can get it. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Did they have armed guards at the Library of Congress to this level?
Not to this level. They do it like the front.
I mean, I'm sure they have security
entrance, but that's it.
Yeah, at the main entrance. But once you're in, and you can get request and get in, right? They don't block people from going in. You can.
No, it's like airport security at the Library of Congress. Yeah. You walk in, you put your bag in a X-ray machine. You aren't allowed to have certain things on your keys or certain things in your bag. So like I had to take my pocket knife from my grandpa off my keychain for the summer, stuff like that. But I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But like, yeah, you can just walk into the Library of Congress.
So there's something here that's more valuable than what's in the Library of Congress. I have one song that's a clue. Dun 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 dun. I think
there we go. The Ark of the Covenant
is in there. I think it's the Ark of the Covenant. That's my vote right there.
Somehow they got it.
They've got it. That's right. They have it. So I don't know. Wow. That's just amazing. So is there anything else you can think of that you'd like to tell us about the Granite Mountain Vault, or we'll move on to, there is actually another, almost a sister vault that was built almost at the very same time.
So I'll just speak really quickly on a couple of other things.
Yeah, sure, please.
There was one item that we found once that I thought was really interesting, and it was a ledger of tithing records in the early days of Salt Lake. And what I found was interesting is that if you couldn't pay your tithing, they used to keep track of what you owed so that you could back pay it.
Oh dear. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then I did mention that there's some items that I think are Mark Hoffman forgeries. And I will explain the one item in particular and why I think it is a forgery. So part of the problem with Mark Hoffman is that some of the documents that he dealt in were legitimate, or the documents were legitimate, and then he added a false signature and things like that made it a forgery. And one of the things that I remember seeing in conservation in the church history library when I was there for a summer, there being the vault, I got a tour of the church history library, and they had just finished working on Parley P. Pratt's copy of the Book of Mormon. And then I remember shortly after they were done with the conservation work, it was on display in the reading room at the church history library. And if I remember correctly, there was a news article about the artifact being on display. And that item is no longer in Salt Lake. That item is up at the vault because I was shown that particular artifact on one of my tours of the High Secure Vault. And I thought it was interesting that it was no longer in Salt Lake. And then I was trying to dig up the news article about its acquisition or its display, and I could not find anything.
Oh, so you think that's another Hoffman forgery? A lot of people feel there are so many out there that we really still haven't been able to even pinpoint. So I believe that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and the church won't test any of the items that people might feel are forgeries,
right?
You know, including other professionals working in the department.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that is really interesting. Yeah. Who knows what we consider to be gospel truth, and it's yet another Hoffman forgery. That is so interesting.
Kate, I know you had a faith transition during this time. Did anything that happened at the vault or that you saw at the vault play into that, or did that just happen in and of itself?
So the start of my faith transition kind of happened outside of church employment. And my issues that were exacerbated by church employment were not anything that was vault specific. There were things in the church history department at large that bothered me as somebody with a history background, but there was nothing that I saw at the vault that exacerbated that. Everything else was typical business issues or issues within the field of history.
Right. Yeah, and I think we are going to have Kate back to talk about, church history and preservation and the way it's all handled. I think it's going to be really interesting. So look for that in a little while. All right, let's look now. And for those of you that haven't heard of the Granite Mountain Vault, I bet even more of you have not heard of this vault, that it was built about the same time. It is out there too, and it's called Perpetual Storage. Welcome to the vault. This is an article by Chris Rawl. This is published in the Silicon Slopes magazine back in 2017. And the title says, Little Cottonwood Canyon is home to one of the most unique digital records microform storage facilities in the world. So what are the odds, right? But now, while the other one is church owned, this is a commercial vault. Is that right, Kate?
Correct. Which I thought was so funny. Every time anybody who worked with moving records in and out of the vault would talk about perpetual storage. For a long time, I totally thought they were talking about something in Salt Lake because of the name Perpetual Storage. Made me think of like the Perpetual Education Fund. And so exactly. I totally thought for a long time it was church related, but then I learned that no, Perpetual Storage was actually just up the road in Little Cottonwood Canyon, and that they were a private entity that we did work with pretty closely.
Oh, that is so funny. Yeah. So this was built about the same time. I think we have a couple slides just kind of explaining what this is. For the last 49 years, Perpetual Storage has existed as one of the most unique storage facilities in America. And I think this article might be, I think it's longer than 49 years right now.
It was 2017 was when.
Yeah. So a little bit longer. A maximum security digital records and microform storage vault cut into a mountain of solid granite. So again, very similar to the other one. The Perpetual Storage Vault is housed inside what's called a monolithic laccolithic. Is that laccolith?
Laccolith.
Laccolith. We're learning new words that start with if today.
It sounds like geology.
It does. In layman's terms, thank goodness, this essentially means it is all one rock, just carved into one rock. That's amazing. How rare is this? Well, there are only 3 other monolithic laccoliths. Look, I can say it now, in the continental United States, and it can withstand virtually any natural disaster on Earth. That's amazing. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. You want to read that, Landon? Ooh, look at that. Here we have some armed guards.
Yeah. Perpetual Storage stores digital and microfilm records from a variety of clients, including manufacturers, financial institutions, hospitals, human genome projects, genealogy companies, medical device companies, and governments on the local, state, and federal level. Beyond the relief from natural disasters, the extent of protection offered to clients is pretty remarkable, like DoD level remarkable. We take a multi-layered security approach, both physical and non-physical, said Lynch. We have various detection systems in the places built to Department of Defense specifications. In essence, we're a commercial SCIF, which is a sensitive compartmented information facility. We have our own armed guards. We have our own courier service. Our clients cannot deliver or pick up digital media directly from the vault.
Wow. And Lynch, I believe, is the name. Now, if I remember, there was another article I read where it was like a husband and wife that had started it, and then the husband passed away, and the wife has been running it, I think, for decades. I think is what I heard. It's like woman run, I read somewhere. So does that sound right to you, Kate?
I am not as familiar with perpetual storage, so I don't know, but I'm like, ooh, are they hiring?
Yeah, are they? You know what? They might be. Yeah, this sounds pretty high level. And Landon, like you said, you work in things that are with skiff, right? I mean, you understand these terms, you understand what this means. This is uber level.
Yeah, I mean, a skiff is designed so that I mean, even the design is so that sound can't go out, so that listening devices can't be put in, so that video can't be put through a wall or in any way somebody see what's happening. So you know, it's very expensive, very high end, very high security. So.
Wow. Let's go to our next slide. Finish up learning about this. Oh, okay. Let's go back one. Got to keep them in order. So did you, Kate, you guys did have interaction with this sister vault, right? Did you take things back and forth? Did they share things that they stored? What was the relationship?
So I didn't work specifically with them, but there were a couple of people I worked with who did. So I'm not entirely sure what all we were moving to and from those spaces. I just know that we did have a relationship with them, and they probably still do. And yeah, I would help move documents back and forth.
Do you know, so as we kind of touched on, and maybe you can even mention a little bit more now, in the Granite Mountain Vault, let me say that correctly, 6 segments to it, 6, storage vaults. Is this one sort of set up the same way, or do you know very much about how this one's set up?
I have no idea. I will say the picture in the previous slide, though, is pretty similar to what the inside of the Granite Mountain Records Vault looks like. Okay. So on the inside, they look very similar. I don't know if the layout is the same.
Right. Wow. I still just can't believe this is like just up the road. Like nobody knows this is here. And in this case, being commercial, it has, government, documents, things that they're trying to, safekeep, Human Genome Project. I mean, this is amazing that this even exists with the armed guards. It just makes you wonder. I think maybe it's the Illuminati.
I mean, you can totally see the access roads. They're just not labeled. There's only so many turnoffs up Little Cottonwood Canyon. When you're going up the canyon, both of the access roads are on the left. So you might see these weird left-hand turns that you're like, where does that go? And fun fact, that's what this is. And yeah, at least the Granite Mountain Records Vault, you can see it from the mouth of the canyon. When you're going up early in the morning and it's like kind of just starting to get light and it's all lit up, it kind of, my brother said it always looks like an evil scientist's lair, and it kind of does, sticking out from the side of the mountain.
Or a bat cave or something. I mean, look how secure. You can't even pick up or deliver any kind of digital media direct. Like there's a courier. You can't, like, it's so removed from the people that are storing it. Yeah. What is in there?
And that is one of the things I think we helped move back and forth was hard drives.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, external storage.
Wow. Yeah, this is high level James Bond kind of stuff, isn't it? So Granite Mountain Vault, perpetual storage. And then there is another vault. Now, I had heard about this vault from my mom. She said, oh, yeah, there's a special vault. She said it was in the church office building. I don't know how she would know that. And she also said that it was guarded. You can go to our next slide, by 2 Lamanite warriors. Like, I grew up thinking that in Salt Lake, in the office building, there they were. So just regular office door, and they're standing there. And of course, in this vault, my mom described to me, all the things, if you go to the next slide, all the things that you would think would be in there. For example, right, the sword of Laban, like we talked about, the gold plates, the breastplate, the missing 116 pages, those kinds of things would be in this vault. So, hey, don't laugh. Mark Hoffman was about to forge the 116 pages.
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. If he hadn't been stopped, we might be living the Gospel of Mark Hoffman. We might be talking about that and Come Follow Me right now. So,
well, I'm guessing this stuff isn't in there, but I'm pretty sure the seer stone is, and I'm pretty sure that the Book of Abraham manuscript, the papyrus that is supposedly the Book of Abraham, which really isn't, but I'm imagining that's in there too. So there's it. you know, they say it's not secret, but there's certainly things in there that they don't want to display or show.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe Kate, did they pull out the seer stone at one point and have it on display at the Church History Museum that you know of, or has that always been off limits?
That's a really good question. And now that you say that, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Did they? If they didn't display the seer stone, they might have displayed a replica.
Right.
Shortly after they acquired some of the translation manuscripts from the Community of Christ, because I was working there when they did that too.
Okay. Really. So they were acquiring I remember like through the last couple of decades you hear we purchased this from the Community of Christ. And I guess that's a good question. Do you feel like everything that they have purchased now, a lot of that might end up in the vault?
So, I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by the word vault. If you mean this first presidency vault that nobody's ever going to see it again.
No, I think I mean the granite, well, some of the records and things, because they purchased records and art, artifacts, all kinds of things.
It could. I will say that since they built the Church History Library, which was dedicated in like 2010 or somewhere around there, because again, I was working there that summer when they dedicated the Church History Library. Part of the purpose of building the Church History Library was to also build more storage space. And so there is a lot of room in downtown with proper archival storage, depending on the type of artifact. So like they have, AV materials and manuscript materials, photo storage, things like that. They do have the capacity for all of that in the Church History Library, and there are several floors worth of storage underneath the library itself. And maybe we can talk about this when I come back to talk about church history.
Yes.
But there is a chance that a lot of the manuscripts, if they aren't deemed too rare, will end up being kept there. But there is also, yes, a good chance that they will decide that they are rare enough to necessitate being stored at the vault.
I'm surprised. I would be surprised that they wouldn't put the Book of Abraham and the Seer Stone in one of those areas, not in the Granite Vault, because if there was a nuclear war, they'd want those things to disappear.
There you go, Landon. Well, if you want it to disappear, you put it right there in the museum. Kids touch it, smear things on it. Pretty soon it's going to degrade and it'll just be gone. So you're right. I agree. There are some artifacts and manuscripts that they just wish would just kind of, leave and not be around anymore. They can be very problematic. So, but it's fascinating. And I did read talking about the Community of Christ, that they are going to bring the Liberty Jail door and those two portraits, the one of Emma and Joseph, to the church museum, I think the end of this month. So for any of our viewers or listeners that are local in that area, you can come and see the Liberty Jail door and those portraits. So that'll be kind of a big deal. And maybe that's, that to me, that's like, okay, they're starting to display things. So maybe that means not everything is just going to disappear into a vault. Maybe there will be some things that the public will have access to, because I know we're all worried about that.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the things that the public will get to view are obviously the things that bolster the narrative currently being told.
Yes. We're concerned about that too.
Contradicts the narrative gets put in the vault.
Yeah, and that's it. But we're committed to preserve the narrative, absolutely. And we are very curious about that. What is going to be different now when you take a tour, that the church is, the LDS Church is leading as opposed to when the Community of Christ led it. So I think we're going to do a podcast on that pretty soon, maybe next week.
I don't know, maybe I'll have to go. I actually served my mission there.
Oh, you did?
In
what capacity?
I was not a visitor center sister, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Full proselyting sister. But I did interact with the visitor center sisters, and just pointing to another episode, we could talk about that too.
Yeah,
about church history, because I also spent some time working in historic sites in the church history department.
Oh my God, you are a treasure trove. Yeah, I've never been back to Nauvoo. Landon has, and I swear I love church history 1,000% more now that I'm a post-Mormon and really dig into what everything means. I can't wait to go to Nauvoo. Honestly, I am really
now, because they're changing.
I'm hoping this summer. Yeah, I just never had a desire before figure it was too triggering. When I was in the church and just triggered by everything and upset, now I'm like, I'm so at peace with it. I've learned so much and I really want to go see what everything is. And I also want to understand the narrative that they're putting out there, So.
Yeah. Well, and the narrative will be changing at Nauvoo. So
yeah, for sure.
Because
in what way?
So when Nauvoo was restored initially, they received some federal grants, and so they had to talk about how Nauvoo fit into the larger story of the American West. And so they modeled it after colonial Williamsburg. And so that's currently why Nauvoo feels a little different from the other historic sites, and they talk more about how people lived day to day. But they will be changing that to a much more faith-based narrative and talking about the building of the temple. And so, the narrative will very much be changing from here's how people lived every day to the testimony of the saints.
And they use government funds to build it, and now the time periods elapsed that they can now change.
That must be what it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
It expired, and now they can tell the truth. Well, their version of the true story. It's interesting because I know there are some, and we're going to do a podcast about this. There are some narratives that that Community of Christ just says, no, there's really not enough to back that up. Like the big one of Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith seeing Christ in the temple, as I understand it, the Community of Christ, they're like, might be more of a third party account. And so, they don't really necessarily tell that narrative, but I think that'll be the predominant narrative when people visit now. I think senior missionaries will be, because I've heard that they're going to be the ones leading the tours. I think they'll be sharing that. So, because it's a foundational story in Mormonism.
Yeah. Well, and that's not to say, so like the missionaries giving tours are given guidebooks and they're supposed to only talk about what's in the guidebooks, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a myth that's perpetuated somewhere that they end up pulling in. And that's actually a massive issue as far as managing historic sites. And a couple of years ago, they made a clerical adjustment where historic sites are now managed by historic sites and not the missionary department, which was in part so that there could be better oversight for the narratives being taught.
That is really interesting. So prior to that, all of these sites were under the purview of the missionary department, which tells you exactly what the function was, the reason that they thought they were there. That is really fascinating. Wow.
Had the vaults always been under the church history department, or did that change?
Yes. So when I first started working there, it was the family and church history department. The church really loves 3-letter acronyms, so it was FCD. And then while I was there, they split into the family history department and the church history department, and the vault went with the church history department and has been there since that split. So at one point it was all one department, and then when it deviated, the vault went with church history. So while all of the records that they hold are for family search, which is in the family history department, it is managed by the church history department.
Yeah, we're learning so much. Like, this is so interesting. I hope that our viewers and listeners think so too, because I think it's something that nobody, number one, probably even realized existed, or especially what the details are. So let's go to our next slide, which I think is our last slide. I wanted to see, to me, this is extremely unique, right? A religion that has an underground vault. Well, it's not. Of course it's not. The Scientologists also have this. So I thought I would just bring this up. I found this article today, and these are two pictures. It's actually underneath these crop circles, which is really interesting. So this article I found says, the Scientologists are yet another religion with an impenetrable bunker shrouded in mystery. Apparently, God likes secrets. That's true. Their vault is in an underground complex in a New Mexican desert. Landon, I think we have our next field trip right there.
I think so.
Only a few hours drive from the alien hotspot, Roswell, New Mexico.
I've been to Roswell, yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't know about this, did you? Or you
no,
probably
I'd have
could have driven
gone.
a little farther down the road. That's right. Inside the cave, which is built to withstand a hydrogen bomb, are titanium caskets containing steel plates and gold discs inscribed with fundamental Scientology teachings.
So they actually have gold plates.
They do have, wow, okay. I'm feeling like a Facebook post on that right there, that they actually have them. So, wow, that is interesting. Gold discs and steel plate. let's see, it says steel plates and gold discs inscribed with fundamental Scientology teachings. Wow. All is shielded by 3 5,000-pound stainless steel doors. On the ground above the vault are crop circles. You can see that there in the graphic-esque markings that are only distinguishable from the sky. Okay. Naturally, most people assume the symbols are meant to communicate with extraterrestrials, and forever Scientology members have confirmed, and former Scientology members have confirmed the speculations by explaining the markings are meant to act as a landmark for future Scientologists who visit Earth from different planets.
That makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. In fact, I feel like the Granite Vault ought to have something like that when people come from Kolob. Come on. Still others have said the symbols aren't necessarily meant to signal aliens, but represent a return point for church founder L. Ron Hubbard. Okay, that's right, because he is supposed to come back. Who Scientologists believe will need to find his way back to the religious base after he is reincarnated. Okay, so
I wonder if he's in one of those titanium caskets.
I thought he was cryogenically frozen. Wasn't L. Ron Hubbard, or
he could have been, but then wouldn't you put that in a titanium casket and keep it cold? Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, maybe that's it.
They must have refrigerated storage there or something.
I can't even imagine. Unless you're in the upper echelons of Scientology, you'll probably never catch a glimpse of this bizarre vault as it's defended with gates, armed guards, and security cameras. So to me, it's exactly what the LDS Church has. I mean, obviously they have their different special religion-centric things that they're protecting, but it's the very same thing. Apocalyptic, the end of the world, steel gates, doors that'll crush your car, armed guards, and it's all protecting things that anyone outside of the religion would probably go, what's this? Do you guys see it that way? Or what are your thoughts, Kate, on the Scientology vault?
Well, so I find it so interesting whenever any of my friends who are still in the church watch cult-related documentaries on anything by like Jehovah's Witnesses or on Scientology, and they will be like, "Look, that's so weird! Ha ha ha! They're crazy!" Cool. And then I'm like, "Okay, but do you see how we do the same thing?"
Exactly.
And where you're like, "Oh my gosh, the Scientologists are so weird! I can't believe they have a vault." And I'm like, "Okay, but we do the same thing, and if they're weird and their behavior is cultish." What is ours?
No, ours is the true behavior and ours is the true vault. So that's what we have to remember.
Did you guys have a library loan program with the Scientologists where you'd, share a gold disc for a Sword of Laban? Or
that's it.
No, but they should. However, okay, so I do want to say, as we were going over this slide, this did actually remind me that one of the myths about the vault, the Granite Mountain Vault, is that there's enough like food and water up there for all of the members of the First Presidency to survive an apocalypse. That is not true.
That isn't true, because I had heard that too, that it was almost like a Noah's Ark, like they could all run for the hills. And
they have supplies there for the employees at the vault, but that's really if there's any sort of disaster that makes them stuck in said vault.
Okay.
If there's a massive earthquake and you can't get out, what are you
right? Okay, that makes sense.
But yeah, it's too far removed from Salt Lake for it to be any sort of like presidential bunker for church leadership to hide out in.
Huh. And I always thought, honestly, if you're going to repopulate the world by having people hunker down in a bunker, 12 nonagenarians, they're not
probably not your guys.
You need to bring some other people in to repopulate the world. The nonagenarians are not going to be able to cut it.
And since no women would be allowed in the vault,
that's what I'm saying. They're not really thinking. No, they need to bring some fresh young people in. Wow. Well,
it's amazing to me. Somehow, both of these Scientologists don't believe in Jesus, I guess, but everyone seems to believe in this apocalyptic end of the world, and that, at least with the Mormons, that, if you build it deep enough in a mountain, Jesus can't get to it in the final destruction that we talk about. It seems kind of faithless to me that you would say, oh, we've got to protect all this stuff, because when Jesus comes, we have to be able to present to him, the records of the 1% of the human population that's ever lived. Well, where are we going to get the other 99% of the records? Well, probably from Jesus is what we're told, or from heavenly
Exactly.
records. So don't they have all these records already backed up? Why do you need to have an armed guard and a deep bunker and all of this to preserve genealogical records? It's
Yeah,
something they're just.
I think it's artifacts. I think it must be artifacts because you're right. I mean, 99% of the world's population lived before recorded anything. Like we don't know, we'll never know, you know. So, and also you're right, it is kind of faithless because when Jesus comes back, couldn't he just protect wherever the records are, even if they're out there in a park or something, you know what I mean? So to have to protect them from Jesus and
Or he
his
knows when he's coming, he
apocalyptic
sends angels
destruction.
in to grab them and whisk
Yeah,
them away before
exactly.
he destroys everything, you
This is
know?
splitting hairs, though. This is how many angels can dance on the head of the pin. And you know what? Here's what I'll say. We will find out on April 8th, because as we
Yes.
all know, that is the end of the world. It is going to happen. So everybody head for the vault. No, I'm kidding. You can't get in. You're be crushed by a gate. So you're not going to want to do it.
If you're not crushed by a gate, you're going to be crushed by all the falling rock.
That's right. That's exactly it.
That is actually a concern up there, is
Oh,
occasionally rock pieces break off
oh,
and
really?
end up in the parking lot. There's never been
Oh,
any major damage, but if there is a massive earthquake, anything in the parking lot's toast.
wow. Have you seen damage like that before? Where just now and then something falls, you come out from work and you're like, my car.
I mean, yeah, we found rock chunks in the parking lot all the time. And I mean, that's just an issue up that canyon as a whole.
Right.
My family rock climbs up there. So, we are very familiar with the geography or geology of the area. And so, yeah, it's just an issue with the nature of the rock. Things, ice gets in, expands, contracts, expands, contracts, chunks
Right.
break off, fall down the mountain all the time. That's normal. But that is, yeah, every now and then we have to think about that. And I'm like, how close do I want to be, closer to the wall or farther away from the wall when I park my car
A
today?
little
I
bit
don't know.
back. Well, and somebody might say, I mean, isn't all of Utah on a fault line? I mean, is it really the safest place to have a vault? I don't know.
Well, and I mean, I think the area up that canyon is fairly safe. I will say, however, this is actually interesting that you mentioned that. So the University of Utah has a seismograph, and you can check the data from it about, real-time plate movement along the fault line in the state of Utah. And that seismograph is actually kept at the back of the vault.
Oh, you
It's
mean
in the
taking
same.
data in the
Yep,
back of the vault?
yep.
That is
Because being
fascinating.
right between where the two canyons converge, it's one of the best places for accurate
Oh,
data. So
okay.
yeah, the University of Utah seismograph is in the same room as the reservoir.
Huh.
I want to
Dang it.
ask
I
one.
wish they gave tours. This is
I
just
want to.
fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I want to ask a question too. I always assumed, and I guess wrongfully so, that these big vaults, when I heard of these vaults, that they were excavated when they were cutting the granite out for the Salt Lake Temple, and then they just made vaults out of it. So this is not the same place where the quarry for the Salt Lake Temple blocks came from. This was intentionally blasted out.
It is in the same canyon. So the temple quarry is like a half a mile down the road from where the vault is. But the vault space was specifically constructed because I think construction began in 1958. It was completed by 1965. So the vault was constructed specifically for that purpose. It was not any sort of holdover from excavation for the Salt Lake Temple.
Okay.
Hmm. Wow, I think we've covered it. This has been absolutely fascinating. Maybe it raises more questions than it answers. What do you think? I want to know what's in there. I really do. I feel like with all of that security, there's got to be something that they, just don't want to get out.
I don't know. Maybe I'll have to come back for an Ask Me Anything where after people listen to this episode, they can send in
Yeah.
questions and I can try
No,
and answer them.
yes. I feel like we're going to do that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. If anybody has any questions, and again, I will be airing this in a live format. So hopefully Kate can join us and we can also ask questions. We probably have been asking questions in real time. So but this has been fascinating. Do you think that we've covered it, Landon? Do you have anything else, any other burning question about the vault?
I don't. I think I've expressed my concern. I'm still befuddled by this immense amount of security for some
Yeah.
documents. It just seems
Yeah,
like overkill, but the church is known for overkill of
it
everything.
is.
I guess if you put a lot of security around it, it seems important. Uh,
Yeah.
even if it isn't important.
Well, and important is relative, it is. What would be important to the church for two reasons. Number one would be like, preservation. It's part of our heritage. Number two, oh my God, we can't let this get out. This will change everything, So to me, there's a couple different reasons why you would have that kind of security. And also, I think the other concern is just access, as Kate described, that only certain people, very high level, very approved, can even get access and request, these things go back and forth. So,
well, it seems irrelevant for genealogical records at this point. There are so many servers and backup locations that this data would be on that, you're not going to lose those records. Yeah. But the things you don't want to get out that there's only one of, that's the only thing that would make sense to keep in that place and really secure it at this point, it would seem.
Yep, like the original manuscript they were working on as they concocted the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
There, I said it. Here, Oliver, you write this line. Oh, no, Sydney, put that in. It's awesome. No, I'm adding this. That manuscript. That I'd like to find. That's just my personal opinion.
Kate, have you found that manuscript?
That's right. Have you found that manuscript?
No, I really want to.
Oh, it's in there. I guarantee it's somewhere. So, all right. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. And as I mentioned to everybody, we, in our conversation, kind of how our process is, we'll find somebody interesting we want to talk to, and then we'll have a phone call. And that usually ends up being so good that we're like, damn it, why didn't we tape this? Because it was just amazing, but we don't. But in talking to Kate, there's a lot more that we want to talk to her about, just as far as historical, just everything having to do with history and preservation and the church history library. She has a lot of knowledge. So we're going to bring our stone cold fox Kate back again. But for now, we'll end here. And please comment. What do you guys think is in the vault? Seriously, throw out your ideas. And if you have any follow-up questions for Kate, you can leave them, here in the comments, and we'll make sure that we help, that she sees them and that we get back to you, because you've probably thought of some questions that we haven't, because I think there's a lot to know and a lot to explore in this. So please like and subscribe to Mormonish Podcast. And if you'd like to be made aware of when new episodes come out, you can hit that notification bell. If you would like to financially help support Mormonish Podcast, we always have links in the show notes to PayPal and Venmo and mormonishpodcast.org. And our newest little thing, and we actually, Landon, have some examples here, don't we? Okay. We have Mormonish merch. It's unbelievable. We actually do. People have been requesting this, and we finally do. And the link to that is in the show notes. We have fun mugs in all different colors. What else do you have there, Landon? We got kind of like this Santa bag of stuff today. It was so fun. We have cute water bottles. You have there it is, a sweatshirt. I have a really cool, cute little, look, I'll put it on over my reading glasses. Cute hat, right? Anyway, Mormonish merch, if you want some, there's a link to it in the show notes and on all of our different social media. So thank you once again, Kate. It was amazing. And we will see you back again for sure. And all the rest of you too. Thank you, everybody, from Mormonish. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.